All right. Well, everybody, welcome to our first podcast here. The title will be shown somewhere over the screen once this is online. And so basically, this is more of a conversational type of exploration of various ideas. And I thought we'd just start out with first topic. I forced Kathy, and we can have, in fact, Kathy, I should interview Kathy. See, I don't know anything about her. She's a woman of mystery. I know she has a cat or several, but I forced her to watch a movie last night called The Holy Mountain. So, what was your opinion of that film?
Probably if you were on a psychedelic, it would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
There's a lot of symbolism in it, and I actually kind of had to force myself to watch it because I found myself getting somewhat distracted and irritated by it. But at the same time, it had a lot of interesting things that were being put forward. But what frustrated me is I couldn't put the pieces of it together. Like, when there were the iguanas that were all dressed up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an interesting film. I mean, it's replete with a massive amount of symbolism. So you have every single color is extremely important to you. You have all the colors. There's all these different alchemical symbols and things like that. And it's quite long. It is. I did find myself also wanting to turn it off, but I made it through the whole movie, so that was good. And it's interesting that there's not really been a detailed analysis, at least online, that I could find of the movie. Because if you want to talk about Illuminati or whatever type of stuff, I mean, on a very deep level, so not on a superficial level, but on a level that's not only multi-layered, but quite dense with, references all the way from, Kundalini stuff to the, that sect, what is it, the Chabad sect, he wraps that leather strap around his arm and this stuff to various forms of Tantra, to all kinds of stuff. I mean, for example, in the beginning.
Also, there's a lot of references to the tarot deck.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the tarot deck is completely. Did you notice the pictures of the tarot? They're very odd, and they had the way they panned and showed those different ones. And yeah. So there's a whole, again, a whole range of symbolism. I mean, you can look at it. One part is, the Christ-like figure. So in the beginning, he can't even speak. He's he just makes these guttural sounds, right? He doesn't even have language. And so, you could look at that sort of as being the Western civilization, the icon of Western civilization, right? Going through these various permutations, sort of a representation of the quote unquote dominant culture, right? But then you have it's even just the first 20 minutes, for example, you have the tourists there, right? The tourists are all living through their films. And then this guy, basically, she gets raped by a soldier and her husband's taking pictures of it. Remember that?
Did she get raped? It seemed like she put her, it doesn't seem like she was raped by him. It looked like she was inviting it.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But in a certain way, it was still, it was still kind of forced, but then she sort of acquiesced or maybe even enjoyed it. But yeah, you're right. Maybe rape is the wrong thing. But if you look at it in terms of the soldier, the military and this kind of thing, so it has that implication, right? You're right. It wasn't actually a rape, but it was kind of
let's frame it, because there's the context there. So the whole thing that was really strange to me was the voyeur aspect of it. That it was almost as if though the people were all there. It was like a tourist attraction.
Well, it was exactly, and that was the whole point. I mean, you have sort of this police state, all the military guys with the gas masks on everywhere, and then you have the odd. Well, how about the opening scene? I mean, just that is pretty.
Well, I'm always wondering, like, for what came up for me, just the weird thing is, like, how many parents would let their kids little boys run around naked, like with their ding dongs hanging all out and chasing this guy? I mean,
yeah. Yeah. Well, then how about even they have the group of prostitutes, and then the young little girl prostitute goes. That old man comes up to her and he takes his eye out and puts his eye in her hand.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, there are so many things about that movie. It's just one scene after the other of bizarreness.
Yeah. I found it. Oh, go ahead.
The thing that really struck with me was when they were going through the different, so in the movie, they go through different scenes of the planets. And when Saturn came up, you had again the guy wearing the cube on his forehead.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that cube supposedly represents Saturn, right?
Well,
And even, I don't know if you got far enough. Guess we're going to go into this topic. So it's like the ladies, I don't know if you got to the part where they're actually climbing the mountain at the end of the movie, the last part of it.
I didn't watch the very end of it. I
Oh,
got through about an hour and 20 minutes of it.
okay, you missed the best part. No, so the end, they go to this island, right? Finally, the 9 people who are going to become the 9 immortals, right? Who sit above humanity and rule. And that's that necklace, right? Has this 9 and that's also very referential. So I mean, again, the level of occult symbolism is there's just dense. Every few frames, you've got a whole nother thing going on there. I mean, even the music, you can trace how he's shifting the perspective from these different worlds. But so anyway, they're climbing the mountain, and so one of the ladies, I can't go on, and then she starts actually having sex with the mountain, or moving, like, you know what I mean, like she's having sex with the mountain, which is a connection with the earth. And so that then she's able to go on from that. But that also, say, like the Wailing Wall, you have that Saturn thing in front of the Wailing Wall. That motion is actually having sex with the goddess, not with a goddess. I don't know if you knew that, but the motion at the Wailing Wall is also replicates sexual intercourse with this goddess figure. Yeah, so there's a whole level of occult symbolism. I mean, obviously, it's a very high budget film, right? I mean, the movie must not have been cheap to make. It's very well shot, right? Very excellent, and it's millions and millions of dollars.
Yoko was involved in it, wasn't she?
Who?
Yoko Ono?
I don't know. Was she?
Yeah. And
Okay.
the Beatles producer was involved with it too.
Okay, I did not know that. So it really ties into this stuff. And then what's interesting is, as they're going towards the mountain, they get to this place, and it's like this sort of a paradise bar or something like that, and a Centurion bar. And this guy he's like a leprechaun, tries to entice them to go into this bar. And all these people are enjoying various things. And these are people that didn't make it up the mountain, right? And so one guy is there taking LSD, and he's saying, and this is like, I've now reached like nirvana, and now I've reached. So basically every religious state, he said, is in this vial, his jar of LSD. So he's eating the LSD. That's one of the guys in this lower town. But anyways, by the time they finally ascend the mountain, when they get there, the director is that the guru, the teacher, is the director. Yeah. So they get to the top, and they sit at the table. They get to the table, right, where the 9 immortals are sitting, and it turns out they're just dummies, right? And they knock all the dummies off on the ground, and then the director starts going like this. He's like going, and just joking and laughing. And then he said, "You're all illusion." He said, "You have to return to the real life, and the quest is just going back to life, and we're just images in a film." And they zoom up and they show the whole camera crew and the shooting scene. So they have this, and it's like a meta scene. He flipped the table over. They're all sitting around the table, and they zoom, and you see, all the camera crew and the guys on the tower, and then it just ends. So it's kind of like you go through the whole journey, which definitely, I think it has some effect on the mind too, because there's so much symbolism, so much, so many layers of that. And we could just go on and on. Like he's like the pentagram, the golden pentagram coin. Remember that? He's like blessing him with that. And so basically, though, at the end, it's like, well, it was just you just got to return to real life, and then we're just images, we're just your simulacra, we don't exist, and then it ends. So, question is, go ahead.
It reminds me of the Venus part, because I actually wrote it down. It says, "We know people want to be loved, not for who they are, but what they appear to be," and so they wear masks that have texture, warmth, and smell like human beings. And a customer can have any face she wants. Every face is unique, and it lasts a lifetime. And
Yeah,
I thought that was fascinating. Are you really you and who you are? Or are you a mask and almost an illusion of who you think yourself to be?
Yeah, the persona in this thing. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, remember the scene where they all burn themselves? They burn the effigies of themselves, and then, of course, the Christ figure is the thief, and everyone's burning their money. He's stolen $2 bills or whatever they are, and so they catch him, which is kind of funny, that he was.
Well, there's a scene where they have where he defecates into the container.
Yeah, yeah, and it's turned into gold, and that's transformed into gold. And yeah, so there's so much there. I mean, he himself. I need to find. There has to be more information on it, but online it's just nothing.
Well, I was watching the movie. I thought, why would Hans have me watch this whacked out movie at night, right? And so I thought there's got to be some symbolism or something on it. So I Googled it, and I'm like, everything was very, not very deep and not making a lot of connections. And I thought, this movie has so much, it's so jam packed with symbolism. You could actually do a course on it, I bet.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I found a Pinterest site. I was trying to search for it. It has had a lot of really interesting, like original alchemical images and stuff. So even like when the Christ effigy is brought upside down with the red and blue balloons, right, and the sort of number of the balloons. But
well, then let's still go back because they made effigies of him at the beginning, hundreds of them.
Yeah, yeah. And then they made all these effigies, and he starts smashing them, and finally he starts eating the face. It's made out of bread. He's eating the face of the Christ. And then notice though that like the what do you call it, the dwarf guy with no arms,
Right.
no arms, and so he was a major figure too. You get to the point where he says thoughts have their own physical forms within the realm of consciousness, and he brings out these cubes in this triangle, and to the Christ pseudo Christ figure, he said you're caught up in your thoughts. So he does it. They do this ritual to the guy, and then suddenly that dwarf guy appears to him, and he's holding the dwarf, and you saw that, right? And then the other people can't see it, and finally he throws the dwarf over the edge of the boat, and and then you have like this thing where the soldiers, they're all dancing with men. The guy in gas masks are dancing with men.
Then there's that scene, I forgot which one, because I put a note for myself on it, but it was with Uranus, and it had the ass whipping part, and the men were the soldiers that were wearing garters and white panties.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of the transgender, like the guy with the breast. Did you see the scene at the end where they're going through their final temptations on the road of death? You should watch the very end of the movie. So we should discuss it. Watch the very end, yeah. Because the interesting thing is this: it's a hodgepodge, though, right? You have everything from I Ching, I Ching hexagrams, again, the tarot, Kabbalah, and then all the Hindu stuff. You have the big eye with the Om, and then the Dham, which is the Sanskrit letter is Om, and then Dham for the eye that's rotating around. And so you have all of these layers and all of these things that are occurring, and yet does it really make any sense? What does it do to you? What do you gain? And he says that everyone should make their own interpretation. Now the question is, to what extent is this also mirroring the level of the manipulation of culture and society, right? This is the operational level of all this symbolic language and all of this occult stuff that's going on. You know what I mean? In that way, you could see as kind of as a revelation, a little bit of to what extent, what's behind all of this. Did you get little snippets? You see a Beyonce video, you might have a little image here or there, but this is like full on, straight through this, this depth of this layers, and then also, of course, you have sort of annihilation of the Christ figure of the Christian type of thing. He's kind of a fool. And by the way, at the very end, that
he's supposed to be the fool from the tarot deck.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the end, the one lady, she's like, who was following him around, she finally gets to the mountain, and the guy says, "Don't come to the table. She's a good woman. She loves you. Just go back with her." And he leaves with the lady at the very end. He doesn't even go. Yeah, he doesn't even go into the table of nine, the nine immortals. But so that's interesting though. If you look at this layer of, say, what's controlling, right, the culture, you have this thing of man becoming God, of reaching to the point of godhood, and the Rosicrucian stuff is very heavily in that film as well. And so, and then there's a critique. Now, is it a critique of that, or is it working with that, or is it somewhere in between? There's obviously some social
parody at times of it.
Sorry?
Parody.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it goes through so many different levels of it, and it's fascinating that there be a movie like this where so much was spent, and like I had never heard of it before.
Yeah. Sorry, my little screen here is falling. Okay, it's cello. It's editing. I got my headphones. I look like the baker. You know, what is that? Midnight Kitchen. I don't, yeah, man, look at that. Look at this
What is
crap. It's a windscreen. I use it for recording and stuff, but somehow it's just taken on a life of its own.
that?
And it's nobody, don't think anything of that thing going limp. It looks all right. We'll just forget that.
There wasn't much. I mean, there was a lot of full frontal. What was surprising to me, I don't know what the rating of the movie was, but there was a lot of nudity in the movie. A lot of the sex. I mean, not in a sexual way, but there was a lot of that within the movie.
There's a tremendous amount of sex. Yeah, I mean, it's like every few scenes. And how about the guy who ran the factory? And he would just the women. He would look at them and seduce them, and then she starts coughing up diamonds. She's eating diamonds.
Yeah.
And then she has a child, and he becomes his new wife. But and he said, I only make love during working hours.
Right.
And
and then I noticed what the women were wearing was like, they all look like pumpkins. They had on those orange outfits with the yellow piping on it.
yeah.
That I was curious to myself, what's the symbolism of that?
Yeah. And then his father, who's the master of the business, the founder of the business, is deaf, dumb, and blind. And any new product, his mummified wife, he says that when her sex is moist, I know it's a good product. He knows it's a good product, which is pretty wild also, So there's so much there. I mean, he has some other movies also. He has one that I think deals with Santeria and stuff. So I just threw that out there because I knew it was an interesting film, because I'd watched parts of it. I never managed to get through the whole thing. But the question, again, is to what level, especially when you get this hodgepodge and then you end with, just go back to real life. This whole journey was just, like he said, life is always changed. There's no end to the journey. So it's kind of like, is the end a cop out? Or is this when he pulls back and shows that it's just a recording, that it's a film, and these are just images you're watching in a simulation? I mean, so that really ties into this, this realm of consciousness sort of as being detached, from actual reality, right? The realm of the simulation. The simulacra, so to speak.
Well, it goes back to what you said. Like, look at the time it was filmed, 1973, and what was happening in the United States during that time, and what narrative is it feeding into? This whole thing that is life really real? Oh, it's just a movie, It's all an illusion, and I think we kind of lose something from that because it doesn't really feel like an illusion when something's happening to you.
No, exactly, and. The one thing about it is that, okay, so there's a lot of different sort of occult traditions and even spiritual practices that are alluded to. Like when he brings the guy's energy through different chakras with a little bell tone after a little martial arts battle.
Right.
White and black. You have the white and black. You have also the pillars of Boas, and so there's also tons of Masonic symbolism, and it's very deep. And I'll just confess, I need to do more research on the director in the film, but everyone's talking about Illuminati symbolism in movies. I mean, this thing is by far more than any other movie, but it's not just symbolism. It actually is enacted and you know what I mean? So it creates this almost kind of a resonance.
It weaves in so many elements because it's not just that. To your point, it weaves in all these different religious elements. It weaves in the Kabbalah. It weaves in tarot. It weaves in astrology. It weaves in so many different things.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it's done well enough that you think that everything is thought through in this. It's not just there's other films like the Kenneth Anger film Invocation of My Demon Brother or Lucifer Rising, just absolute crap, just a bunch of guys stoned running around in the woods, or whatever, just terrible, But this is really well made, and really every single element in every shot and every scene is so well. Another example of just the subtlety, like when they have the Mayan, the lizards, and then you have the frogs. Frogs are usually a symbol of, the Satan or something like that in black magic. Then they play the German music, the German beer hall music.
Nazi symbolism in there too.
Yeah, no, exactly. So,
and then the frogs die. Don't they spray them all with blood or something at that one point?
Yeah, they get sprayed with blood and then they get exploded. They blow up the Mayan ruins and they explode. So. It's really intense. Anyways, we'll get back into that maybe in the future. But I think that this movie does stand to be pulled apart. And like again, I'm shocked that there's nothing on it. You know, you'd think, and it's considered to be like it's a I mean, for its genre, I mean, it's a well-known film. It's a unique film, right? And like I said, it's something that it's still cutting edge, I'd say. Even if you look at it today, it's still, even everything we've seen, it still has a lot of impact, right?
Well, the scenes, like, I didn't watching it, I found myself getting frustrated because it would move on to another scene, and I'm like, I'm not quite sure the clothing that people are wearing, their hair, the colors. There's so much to it to break down.
Yeah.
And I wonder, are they just screwing with us, or are they really revealing something? What does it all mean?
Or is it an enacted ritual, right? Because they say film is a type of magic. So you're actually, by putting a movie, even if it's not watched by many people, you can actually use, certain people believe in that, those, in those circles, whatever, that you have a film, you're actually casting a spell. You're bringing something into reality. You're doing, you know what I mean? So it has sort of like a magical or mystical purpose.
Like a Super Bowl halftime ritual.
Yeah.
Well, the Olympics, right? The closing and opening ceremonies, the same type of thing.
Yeah. And so, some of these things that even if they're not watched, maybe they have, they believe they have some kind of an effect. So, I need to learn more about the director because obviously, I mean, I think it's one of his first films. He must have got a lot of money to make that film. There's no way. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. A very high budget movie. That's not
involved with it. I mean, you have Beatles stamped all over it, right? You've got Yoko Ono involved in it. You've got their producer involved in it. And so there had to be a lot behind it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then
they invest so much money in it and then not really market it. That's what's interesting to me.
Well, I think, it's probably an art house film. I don't know. There's another film that I mentioned to you, which is a Japanese animated film. And that one is really intense. And that's around the same era. And so you have a lot of these films coming out and this one, gosh, the name is skipping, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's about this woman who's like branded a witch, and then she ends up like coming back and killing everybody. But it has this whole revolutionary ethos, but it has a very, very intense, sort of psychedelic aspect, but psychedelic in the way that it really affects the consciousness of the viewer. And there's a lot of movies that came out around that period that are like that aren't necessarily very well known, and yet. You see that, as I think I mentioned to you talking to you, that a lot of the music that's being repeated every day is right from that era. 73, 74, 75 is really this kind of crucial area because that's, if you look at the crash of the 60s, that's after that, right? That's in this period. You know what I mean? And then this era.
They're looping. There's time looping.
Yeah.
And did you ever watch the movie The Congress with Robin Wright?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, that's very similar to what you were just talking about. So Robin Wright is an actress, and they want to take her and turn her into a cartoon character, or turn her into a character, and she does, and she like inhales this stuff, and she becomes a cartoon character.
Oh, I did see that. Yes, I did. Yeah. And it's animated.
We have the same thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. You get you go into this other reality, right? And then the world around you is the actual world.
No reality.
Yeah. And then, and you wonder, I mean, again, is it a cop-out, the end of the Holy Mountain? Is it a cop-out, or is it like a revelation, or is it just, an exploration? And he said everyone should draw their own conclusions. But, obviously a tremendous amount of thought went into it. It's not just randomly deployed symbolism. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that, but it's very dense, and it all ties together. But you do have to do quite a bit of research. Even the upside down, guy, that's the tarot image, and that's also in some Rosicrucian and Masonic imagery too.
The person. That's the part where the Jesus character is climbing up that big tower, the obelisk.
And that moon, there's a moon imagery, right? The black moon and all that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And then crashes through it, So I'm like, and then the movie goes on, but then it returns back to that scene.
Yeah. No, it's definitely odd, and I wish someone would take the time to really break it down, but maybe that'll have to be me, since unless the Google algorithms have hidden it, because there's people that do this stuff all day, right? That's what they do, but no one's mentioned this movie, and I think you want to talk about esoteric movies. This is it. This is probably one of the more esoteric films, and I'll definitely watch some of his other movies, and see about that, but. Okay, cool. Well, I don't. Did you want to go into any other
Well, what did you
topics?
take from it? Like, if you think about it after watching it, it left me feeling confused. There were some things that were interesting to me about it, especially like the part about this whole thing around illusion. There's so much of that in all of this, like the whole new agey thing. We're just an illusion. We're living in a hologram, and I I have a problem with that.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe the thing is that there's so many. The one thing that you see, I heard a guy. Well, I'll just mention his name. David Dees, a famous illustrator. He's got into some meditation. He's into stopping thought and all this stuff. Well, I mean, even that. One of the things is that if you clarify your mind and your ability to think, then that it does allow you to encompass more experience. You don't have to dissociate or block out types of experiences, right? Now, does that mean that you're trapped in your thought? I think it's an expansion of that, but I think this idea of stilling thought or everything's an illusion. These are types of mental frames that can be. I mean, you can play with them and they can be valuable in certain situations, but you have to be careful that when you start to change your basic patterns of how you see in the world, how you act, engage in the world, how you are in the world, and you start to merge those with ideas you've taken, and at a certain point, there's a subtext. Oh, I have to stop my thought. I'm silencing my thought. So then that's still a thought, right? So what you do is, again, you've created this loop in your mind, or this process that you're not really getting anywhere in terms of actual development, right? And it's possible to go into sort of delusional things. I mean, there's a lot of belief systems, especially on the internet, right? That you can go into these things. They're not really grounded in anything except they're in this virtual world, and you start applying them to your real life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, in the idea that the holographic universe, I mean, it's a nice metaphor. Um, and certainly in the perceptual level, right, of consciousness, our senses are creating, we have all these electrical chemical signals, and we're creating a sense of our representation of the physical world, right? So there is a mental realm of representation, just like your body, the somatic body image, right? You have a mental representation of your body. And that's something you see a lot in this manipulation and warping of this somatic image of people, you know what I mean? Your inner image of yourself, and your mapping of your body, because your body is mapped on your mind, right?
Absolutely.
And so you see people
Well,
that,
our mind maps your body. So you think about your life just went weird, and so it's making your eyes look like you've got glasses on.
yeah, I don't know why, but that's okay. So,
But if you think about it, your body shapes your mind shapes your body in a way. So if you're a person who's feeling a certain way, you might walk like this, or if you're feeling confident, you walk like that. So if you think about it, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions actually help to shape your body.
no, absolutely. I mean, that goes, in multiple ways. I mean, and talking about the somatic image of the body is that, for example, I'm getting darker and darker because the topic's getting darker. It's getting intense. So, for example, when you're playing a musical instrument, you do have to have you're performing an action, but you have a type of map of your body, the somatic representation that is in the mind, but it's experienced. But if that representation is wrong, you can do things. You can damage your wrist if you're playing incorrectly, and you think you're doing something, you're actually doing something different because your mapping of your body and your mind is incorrect. Now, on the converse, obviously, yes, your mind can affect your body, and even if someone is in a different mood, you can change your how much energy you encompass, how large your energy field is, your presence. See, like I just changed the lighting by doing that. See, so I have magic powers here. But no, see, that's an example, right? So, and then the other side is that so many things are linked into habitual bodily responses, right? Types of patterns people are in are linked with physiological things they may not even be aware of that they're doing. And sometimes that can, instead of trying to come at it from the thought level, it can come at it from what's actually happening in the
Well,
body.
and that's what other people are responding to. So, like when I work with clients, there'll be people who have like quirky little things that they do. So, like I know when I went through my coaching program, I do weird things with my eyebrows when I'm listening. And so I'm like acutely aware. Now I just like totally want to get Botox with my eyebrows move. But we all do these weird things, and people pay attention to that versus our words and what we think we're communicating. People are always paying much more attention to what they're reading or what's getting aroused in the other person from us somatically.
Mm-hmm. No, that's absolutely true. But I mean, my interest is kind of in the area of people that have which I see as kind of a societal thing. I mean, first time I saw it, I noticed it was in this movie, the Twilight Zone movie. I think that came out in the 80s. But there's this one, these are just different vignettes. And there's one where this kid has like started to morph the reality of his family into like this cartoon world, but his parents, everyone becomes like his slave, and it was super disturbing. I saw that like when I was a kid. I remember being really disturbed by that. The movie The Congress is another example of it, right? And then you have the other side of it is like what the heck is it? The thing with Leonardo DiCaprio, Inception. You have like that. Yeah, going into the dream world, dream state, merging the dream. But then look at it. You have, okay, let's look at what's being promoted is, people that change their bodies, right? They morph, they get plastic surgery, they look like lizards, they become lions. There's a whole bunch of people like this, trans species. Then you have the transgender. And this is another example of where you have your image of yourself. Sorry.
So I'm going to interrupt you. So what goes into like, why do people think it's better to not be human? It goes back in the whole transhuman thing. Don't be your gender, be a transgender. Don't be a human, be a transhuman. Don't be a human, be a trans animal, or whatever you want to call it. And I think to myself, what the heck has happened to us that we think it's better to be something other than what we are? And that goes back into that movie, The Holy Mountain, into the masks, right? You can be whatever you want to be, but don't be who you are. What makes it so difficult to be who you are?
Well, yeah, no, exactly. But I think part of that is a distortion. I mean, there's so many different levels, right? So you have, I'll give you an example. Hopefully she won't listen to this. There's a very sad lady. I don't know who she is. She jogs by my house. Okay, now here comes the lawsuits, but she jogs by my house, and it's really sad. She's like, really intense on jogging. She's totally anorexic and just looks like a skeleton. And I see her, and I saw her yesterday morning, and just that's exactly what that is that she sees her body in a certain way. She looks in the mirror, that image will be distorted.
Absolutely.
Right? And then people die. Like this is a
funhouse mirror. So it's kind of like if I'm going out and I say to my husband, "Hey, how do I look?" He's like, "You look great." I'm like, "No, I don't." I'm like, "I look fat." And it's like, I think like I'm looking in a funhouse mirror, which distorts the way that I look. And my mind, based on what my feelings and beliefs are and how I've been shaped, can take experience and distort it. Kind of like this woman who's like running like crazy, and she's probably a stick figure. It's like, whoa, she doesn't see what I see.
Yeah, well, not even that. I mean, she's like, her jogging shorts are tied on. She has to tie them on because there's almost no muscle on her body. But she has this intensity when she's running, and really, but that's exactly, I think that's maybe an extreme example, but that's exactly what the transgender, which was considered a disorder until recently, that's what it is, right? You experience yourself, you want to experience yourself in a different way. And then you no longer can even come in contact with your actual experience, embodied experience. And I think, but this distortion, with the cartoons, and even I played some video games with my son before, and I can feel that starting to do things to my brain almost. I see the world, like even after watching The Holy Mountain, you look around you, things seem different, right? It kind of changes.
Well, it goes back into, there's an article that came out, well, there've been a lot of them, about how smartphones distort our experience, and even the term smartphone, but having a phone near you actually reduces your cognitive ability.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it's offloaded into the phone, or what?
Well, the fact that it's even there, so they've done a lot of tests with this. So when the phone is there, it reduces your cognitive ability, and when people are allowed to use the phone, it reduces it that much more. So I guess what it makes me wonder, now our kids are about the same age, right? And we both struggle with the same things. It's like, my daughter's like this in the morning. I talk to her and I'm like, "Alex, I'm right here." And it's like she's more interested in her phone. And I'm like, and it really scares me because it's like she's addicted to her phone.
Well, so many people, I mean, they inhabit the Pokemon Go is sort of an acceleration of that. Like I said, as I said, that was a rollout, just a test. That was a test phase. That this will come more and more in the future. Right now, that's just what I mean. So that had its value to see, but that was a window of really pushing ahead to what the future will look like or could look like. But yeah, people, and they're literally, they're texting their whole lives, their social lives are in that little box, and these text messages and text screens, and then because if you look at it,
I was in New York, and she was on Fifth Avenue, And she was working with a client, and she was waiting at the stoplight, and she said right in front of her, a guy wasn't paying attention. He was on his phone texting. He stepped off the curb, and a cab came down and hit him and killed him right in front of her.
Wow.
I mean, it's just stunning how disconnected we are, because you were talking about something earlier. I'm going to make a jump back to dissociation and stilling thought. But we've become very dissociated. And I'm going to make another jump. It comes into something that you and I had a conversation about a while ago that really ties into a lot of this. And it goes into Heidegger's work on care. What do we really care about? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, the whole structure of care, and that's a huge topic, and I'll definitely prep to get into that, because the care structure is really gets to the heart of his philosophy in a lot of ways. But this, care is a linking of ourselves into our inhabited space, right? So the very important distinction that Heidegger made is that you're not just a disembodied mind. You can't just go into these ethereal realms of Platonic ideals or go into these other things. This is still, that's a particular process, but you are the concept of thrownness. You're thrown into your life. You're in this body. You have a set of parents. You have circumstances. You have an environment, and you have to take that into account. In that is what you are is really, in a certain way, you're related to all of these things. They're also filtered through you. You have a certain type of connection, which may or may not be articulated, right? And you have to go into the heart of the structure in order to sort of pull that apart, right? And he describes this anxiety like towards death, like the sense of dying, to really be able to encompass that as the ending of this life. And that's what really sort of brings out this care also, because of the temporality, right? The temporality is manifest through this process. And it's, because see, if you just, this whole idea was that people were saying, you could just have these dissociated things. You have a hammer, it exists as this object. But in fact, when it's in use, it becomes like a part of the person using it. But there's all these different levels.
And if you think about it, you're talking about a hammer becomes part of the person, in the same way a belief becomes like that with a person too. Because if you ask a person to get rid of a certain belief, in some ways it's almost like you're asking them to amputate their arm.
Yeah, no, exactly.
All these things might seem disparate, but they all are connected in a strange way.
Yeah. Well, I think that, part of what I see is that this removal of the environmental space of our live space for the sort of virtual live space, right? And so this level through the technes, right? Technology, right? Technology is more and more becoming the lived world, right? We're living more and more inside of our technology. Well, at the same, yeah, but at the same time, you look around you, the world, it looks the same as it could have been in 1975. I mean, what's the real difference? You still got, external power lines running above it. I mean, maybe different cities is different, but overall, it looks, in fact, in a lot of places, it looks worse, doesn't it? So our actual environment really hasn't evolved that much. I mean, how nice is it? It's, if you go back to a small town with the old buildings, it's so much better than most of the places we see around us, right? And if you've been to Detroit recently, so many of the cities in America are just decaying, or else they're doing, this massive construction everywhere and just erasing the past and putting in these kind of these kind of new types of buildings, which I think create more dissociation, right? So I think that this dissociative function is that you have this amped up. Go ahead.
Well, think about what's Freemasonry, right? Architecture. And we are much more affected by our environment than we think. And so what's happening with all of these beautiful buildings being taken down and getting replaced by all these homogeneous buildings that all look the same, one after the other? There's nothing different about it. There's no beauty to it. And I think that's what's really striking to me is, like, if you've been through, and I know you have, but when you're through Europe, you see these really beautiful buildings. Here, everything in the United States, in big cities, looks pretty much the same.
Yeah, and there were buildings. A lot of them aren't kept up. They're demolished. You know what I mean? So you can find downtown areas. A lot of these areas. There's one area here in Columbus, Ohio. It's beautiful. These beautiful Victorian houses, huge neighborhood, but it's basically become a ghetto. I mean, the houses are still there, but they're just, so these spaces, these lived-in spaces are removed, and then you fill in the gaps with this virtual space.
Hmm.
You get these little apps. You got Uber. You got the Uber is really convenient, but on the other hand, if you see how different are our lives from the past, well, actually, you can see a lot of ways they've gotten worse. There's less community. There's less sense of kind of living in a space with a neighborhood. That's gotten less and less. The technology is bait. We're still using the internal combustion engines. At least in the United States, there's very little with the public transport. You know what I mean? So we don't really have that much advance. In fact, it's 2017. I mean, we should, you know what I mean? Where's all that we were promised? Well, everything's in our little smartphone and on your computer. That's where the advances happen, right? But in the actual world, unless there's security, new police state measures like body scanners and stuff like that. I mean,
the retinal scanners now that they're using in San Francisco. Like when I fly out of Ethiopia, I now have to put my fingers down and I have to have my fingerprint scanned. And if I refuse to do it, I don't get on the plane.
Wow. Yeah. So what you have is this, I'm saying is you're getting people not to realize that they're not free, right? You're getting them not to notice their actual environment, say, hey, wait, we need to change this urban environment. How are we actually living in the city? How is, they do these things half the time that you don't even know when they're going to demolish these buildings. Is there any?
All the roads. So if you think about, I don't know if this happened in your area, but in my area, they're changing all the roads. So everything.
Oh, absolutely. They're doing that nonstop.
You can't turn around anymore. It's like everything's being changed in very subtle ways. It's so subtle that people aren't even paying attention to what's happening.
No, exactly. I mean, roads you have certain secondary roads you could take, and these are becoming shut down. For example, there's a freeway, and then there's kind of the main street, high street, but there's always tons of traffic and whatever. You're not going to drive down there. But the road where I live, it was sort of an artery. You could go all the way down. Part of this road has been shut down for over a year and a half. And then they cut the lanes down and put in these giant bike lanes. They have this weird middle lane that doesn't do anything. And then they have they went from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane road but then in the middle of the road, it's blocked. So exact point you could get it in the freeway now. The traffic is insane now. You go on the freeway, it's shut down. So it's limiting these options. And even though they'll put a place you could turn around. No, it's one way now, or you can't take it, no right turn or whatever. Mm-hmm. And these are very subtle, but for people that are aware of it, they're going to start to notice. But you creep this in gradually. So pretty soon you're stuck on this, there's no more, especially if you live in a city. It's one thing if you're traveling, right? You're not going to know these little secret roads or, local byways, but you start shutting down. And this is the exact example where the freedom of mobility of the car is reduced. And then so all this freedom is being taken away. Then you add in the retinal scanner, but then you increase the virtual excitement of the world and all this stuff. And then so I think it's supposed to, you kind of keep people not sensing what's happening around them.
Well, sure, they become numb. So this whole thing around, I took I was on a class yesterday and I was writing down, taking some notes and just thinking to myself, this whole thing around busy, I hear clients say all the time, I'm so busy, busy, busy. And I'll say to them, I want you to start noticing when you use the word busy. What does it do for you? Just to your point, it excites you. And so we use this words like rapid, accelerated, busy, faster, innovation. And I think to myself, we're amping ourselves up all of the time. But is it real? What's real about it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that's the stuff I was trying to do with Jan a little bit, get into is this whole idea of our sense of time. And people say time doesn't exist. Well, you can say maybe on a super high esoteric metaphysical level, it doesn't. But the fact is we live in time. Our relationships are in time. We unfold in time. And so this thing, when you say busy, rapid, you have this, you're speeding up your internal sense of time, but you're also compressing the future. You're compressing your experience of events. You're crushing them together. You know what I mean? So you're just condensing all this. So if I have to do this, I have to do that, this. And
you're affecting your body too, because the other thing that I'll experience with clients who are doing that is I'll start to notice that I start breathing from the top of my chest, or I hold my breath. And then I notice that I lean in more, and my peripheral vision gets limited because I'm so focused forward. So you'll see in corporations where people are so busy, people are walking like this, and they're face down, right? And you see it in meetings also, that people sorry, it's my phone ringing. People are so focused on busy that they don't even notice what's happening with their body. So if I've got this thing that I'm so busy, I've got to get this done faster, we have all this pressure on ourselves. It also affects how our bodies feel to us.
Exactly, and how we see, because that peripheral vision, exactly, just by expanding the sense of peripheral vision, can start to slow down time. Now, the thing is, when you're really moving fast, it seems like everything's going very slow, right? So when you do things like when I was writing, I hit like 5,000 words in half an hour, which is like, I'm not sure how I did that. Maybe I can do it again. But when I was doing that, I was very calm. I didn't seem like I was rushing, but I was actually I was going extremely fast, but everything, I had slowed time down. Right. And so I was able to do something that normally wouldn't be possible. And I'll try to do that again here, but see, that's exactly it. Is it the busy, what it does is it instead of allowing you to work more quickly by becoming more aware and more grounded, it creates this counter motion, right? So you're compressing everything, you're rushing, you're narrowing your field of focus, not in a way, though, say, of concentration, where you focus on one thing and you can just draw that into yourself. And really, certain types of things you have to really focus. But it's not. It's like a distracted. It's like a scattered version of concentration, but it's a narrowing. It's like a tunnel vision thing. And I think it's like everything is stacked up.
Everything is so fragmented, and so and this is where the whole notion of multitasking comes in. It's a misnomer. It can't happen. You can't really do anything effectively when everything is fragmented here, fragmented there, and you've got like these little pockets of time all around you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, with the busy thing, you get, it gives you some meaning. It gives you an identity. I'm really busy.
Yes.
I'm extremely busy. I'm a busy person. I get
talk to you. I'm too busy.
Yeah. Well, no, but also gives an identity. It also allows for you to undercut the actual experience of your life. So maybe you don't have to notice what's really happening to you that you really should address. And so this process, it happens on multiple layers, but it's something, like I said, I've been working on sort of deconditioning myself from academia, and I realize I still have this thing in my mind. It will still come over me, and then I will get very, I have all these different things I have to do, but then I realize that the effectiveness, you have deadlines and you have this stuff, but you get in this sort of treadmill thing that it doesn't allow you to actually experience your life. And then actually, I think ultimately it reduces effectiveness.
It becomes like Groundhog Day. One day after, that Bill Murray movie, right? You wake up, it's the same day.
Yeah.
You basically live the same day over and over, and you're living your patterns. And there's no, people say, oh, I'll ask a client, well, hey, how's your journaling coming along? I just don't have time for that. What do you have time for? This whole notion of time and busy really affects where we put our focus, energy, and attention, what we pay attention to and what we don't notice. It allows us to not notice a lot of things.
Oh, absolutely. And if you just notice that if, if you're just screwing off and not doing much, your time can just go by in hours. You can dither around trying to get a project started. 3-4 hours can go. I didn't get anything done. So, but notice how but at the same time, if you remove that, it's like a grip. It is. It's like a pattern. It's almost like an iron grip. Then part of it has to do with the nature of the modern kind of corporate life too, where you're, depending if you're a salaried employee, you're constantly on call. So, you're always, you have to do this, you have to do that, and a lot of times people are just totally inundated with tasks, but even if you are, there's still way more time in your life that you're aware of, and you're not really living. You've gotten rid of your live time. You're living in the future. Your live time has become the space of these unfolding patterns, and that's become what you are. And the more that becomes what you are, the more you have to become attached to it, and the harder it is to let go, because then you have to realize, my God, I've just wasted 20 years.
Well, you're identified with it. And the other thing that comes up to me is that actually, it's going to seem like a paradox, that your life is less complicated because you don't have to balance it so much. So workaholism, or being so involved in work, allows you to put all your focus and energy there so you don't have to really balance so much what needs to happen outside of work. And so I think about the spheres that we have. So we have work, community, relationships, and I was just writing about this. Sorry, I get my little cheat sheet out here. So I think about this, and it's like we don't really have any balance with that. So when so much of the balance is geared towards work, there's less available for family. There's less available for community. And then if you think about it, more needs are getting met at work that are really meant to get met outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
And that continues this whole reinforcing pattern. Because it's like, I'm so busy, I'm working, but that, and it's almost like a very acceptable excuse. It's like an addiction that's acceptable in our society to work.
Yeah. But it's, and the other side of it, say like me, when you work for yourself and you have, I get busy and I have all these projects, and suddenly I don't have projects, I have to reorient myself. So that's difficult. But even, I'm saying, even if it seems like you have all the time in the world, that problem can still be there because we're not balanced, and this even taking time to connect with the community, right? Because these experiences are different. They create different weights of time. And if you're involved in a community activity, your experience of that is going to be different. It's going to kind of ripple out. When you create this balance of these things, and all these other things affect and can bring into alignment or disalignment, depending on how
what really comes up for me is something that you said. It's like, if we're amping ourselves up like that all the time and we're feeling a lot of anxiety, then we're really not accessing like the prefrontal cortex as much. And we're more like in the mid part of the brain, the limbic system. And to really be able to organize things and get things done, we need the capacity of the prefrontal cortex, right? Because that's where the ability to plan, initiate, execute, follow through comes from. So that ability is that somewhat lessened if we're constantly in the state of anxiety, or like fight, flight, fear, whatever you want to call it. It's reduced.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, and Heidegger says, the function of anxiety is actually waking up your being towards death, right? The fact that this, accepting the death, the fact of you will die, right? The finiteness of your life. That is where anxiety, but you have to go through and engage with that. That's one, example of that. But this kind of anxiety is just, it's like a hormonal drug that's injected into the water.
I think people get addicted to their anxiety, and then when they start feeling better, they feel worse because they don't feel normal because they're not feeling that rush of anxiety.
Yeah, and I think this ties into what we kind of started talking about, is this distortion of the internal, the somatic image, right? Where you become disconnected not only from what you're actually experiencing, your actual sensations, but the fact is, again, we have this mental map that's encoded in our brain, and this is what allows us to do things and remember patterns and all this other stuff. And you get further and further away from that, mm-hmm. and it does not allow you, because it becomes more and more filled with this sort of backlog of things you're pushing back, you're shunning aside, while you're on this fast track, right? Mm-hmm. And so it becomes more and more difficult to actually just return to a presence, to a groundedness. It becomes more and more difficult. It becomes almost impossible. Then you have all these sort of barriers that keep you from going there, because you're actually become terrified of actually seeing what and who you are and experiencing that directly, right?
Well, because it's the unknown. So you become to know you less and less because you're so focused on the other aspects of life. You become dissociated, so it's almost like life becomes like an object relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then Grandma Moses started painting when she was like 90 years old or something. So that's an example. I don't know why I brought that. Well, it's just that, what is your life about? We have these things, and I think a big part of it is keeping you constantly locked into time cycles, even mortgage, phone.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but what comes up for me, I want to go back to what you just said. What is life about when it's like this? Like, you're on your Instagram, and my daughter has this thing called streaks, and I'm like, I had no idea. What's a streak? And you have to touch your phone every day. They want you touching your phone constantly, right? And so it's like, what's the value of life, a life lived through a virtual life? What are you really doing? Where are you?
You've become displaced. I mean, I've had someone actually, I have to contact her to help me with like my marketing and PR, which sucks pretty bad. So anyone see my website, but I have to get on Instagram and get on this and put up, and I'm kind of like, man, it just seems like another headache, but also like but a lot of people, they just live, on Facebook, on this stuff, and it's constantly their image, they're projecting, okay, take a picture or whatever they're doing, and that's being reflected through the social they. So it's like a double form of sort of dissociated reality. So not only is the world itself become an object, but then the virtual world, you're creating yourself as an object within the virtual world, and you become an object for your own apprehension within the virtual world. Does that make, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me, have you ever seen that movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis, where everybody's like this big fat, and they live like through these avatars that they have?
Yeah.
So it's almost like people are living this fake reality of their lives through these acts, which isn't any connection. It's like there's no right brain to right brain connection. And then that's really what brings meaning in life, and that's how we feel connected with each other, is by having that type of connection. Just like even this is like the first time we're Skyping. It's different. Yeah. We're talking on the phone, or Zooming, whatever you want to call it. It's different doing this, isn't it, than us just talking on the phone?
Absolutely, yeah. And you can feel that. Even there is, you can feel more of a connection and whatever. So yeah, no, that's great. And but just going forward, I do have to kind of wind down here because I have to begin my exciting adventures today. Going to Jo-Ann Fabrics.
What would be really helpful is like having a topic. Like, I'll tell you where I really want to go. I really want to talk about care. You and I had that conversation, and it's one of the best conversations we've had.
Yeah, well, no, bring up care. But I wanted to say that if you notice this stuff that's going on with the quote unquote truth movement, you see this fracturing going on. We won't mention anyone specifically, but you see this real divisiveness and this, and then you also see people, shifting into these belief systems that are completely just grounded on this virtual world. They're not actually reading text. They're not going out and exploring the world, and so and then you have this control, and at the same time, this whole world can be shut down. You have the, algorithms, you have YouTube shutting stuff down. So, I mean, it's kind of an interesting time. And I think it's more and more important to really try to get an actual grounding in your life, no matter how hard that may seem to do, to be able to see the world around you as it is, at least as, as closely, not to be there.
Really easy to say, but I'll share with you, I think it's hard for people to do at times. And it's like, I don't take for granted anymore. Something can sound something really simple, but it might not always be so easy for people to do. And I think that some of those things that sound like, oh yeah, common sense, I think can be challenging for people to put into action.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the things that seem the most simple. I mean, just one thing is noticing, time. Like if you're walking around texting, you can drive somewhere and not even notice where you are, so how the time gets blurred, like how our environmental connection gets blurred or subsumed, right? And I think ideally, if there is a sense when you have that grounded sense of embodied being, it. It's not something you don't have to say, oh, do I have it? Am I here right now? Where am I? You know it. You feel it. And you but it does require you to be a lot more present to what you're actually feeling, to emotional experience, to maybe things around you that may bother you. You may have, someone who has a very messy house. I mean, they tune that out. They're not noticing the house is messy. And there's countless examples of that.
Or maybe they keep their house messy in an unconscious way so they don't have to feel. Because that's something I really noticed in our culture, is that people aren't comfortable with feeling. And I know I've had to go through some things in my own life where I was like, damn it, there's nothing outside of me that's going to change but me. And am I willing to tolerate being uncomfortable for a period of time while I work through this? Because that's all that's all I have control over,
Yeah. And I think that my experience, at least when, work I was doing based on like the Muzak stuff with the different like being able to start to go into that and really noticing this whole environmental aspect, it did create some discomfort. I started to notice that there's a discomfort which is different from anxiety, right? People are acclimated to anxiety. The discomfort is a dislocation a little bit, but there's a barrier, right? People have kind of a barrier for that. If you can move into that discomfort and dwell into that, and take that in hand, with a sense of power. I think that you have that power just to go into that. Then you really start to open up. But you have that. I think the discomfort is a sign you're on the right track. Which, well, I guess we have to define discomfort. This could be a lot of different things.
A lot of it is the body. Like in all the work I've been doing, I used to work a lot more from the headspace. Now I really bring a lot more of the body, because the body has awareness before my mind does. So like if I feel threatened by something, I can feel like my heart. I was hiking this morning and a rabbit jumped out. A little rabbit. And I'm like all freaked out. I'm like, it's not going to hurt me. But my body sensed it before I did, and I started laughing at myself. And it's like we underestimate. We think everything about the brain, but the brain isn't the mind. And my body is almost like it has its own intelligence,
Oh yeah. There's definitely, the idea of a gut feeling. There's even organs that have their own intelligence type of awareness, and obviously you could say the mind is what's bringing everything together, and ultimately you could say that the function of logic or rationality is to allow you sort of to encompass all this and formulate. But that's that's one type of knowing that is when you see the mind. As soon as you don't, because say in like Hinduism or Buddhism, the center of the mind is located in the heart. It's not in the head, because your emotions, that's your mind. So your mind, this is part of your mind is your feeling and this, all that stuff. This disconnection, right? So you go, well, that's part of the virtual world. You create narratives. You live in these narratives. You dwell in these narratives. And I think a lot of times people can find, they might have kind of very submerged internal dialogues that are going on, very far back in the threshold of consciousness.
They're internalized core. I call them internalized core messages. We internalize what we hear from a very young age, and somebody else's voice becomes our voice. But I want to make a jump back real quick. When you talk about like the heart and the brain, I don't know if people realize that we make more serotonin in our gut than we do in our brain. That's really fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
And our brain makes insulin.
And it's already, yeah.
So there's so much more to it than we give credit to at times, and we're much more complex than we may realize.
Yeah. I think that the trick is I think that, people are talking about going beyond thought and going beyond the mind. Now, obviously, like say, for example, if you have a loop, like if you're stressed about something, you have to do this. Like right now, I've got about 10 things I got to do. I could start getting stressed. I started that loop. But so there is this, we have, again, that narrative sense where you're communicating to yourself. But if you can just allow yourself to experience that on the embodied plane and start to connect with, your body and self in the environment, and then expand that sense, right? Then you can start to get sort of grounding. You could describe it as in the heart, right? But you can start to get a grounding. And I think even your gut, you can feel, there's like the fire within. You can feel the power there. You can draw that into you. A lot of times I think the gut can be a place of just tension or stress. You just try to pretend it's not there. So much anxiety is experienced actually in the gut, because you have that feeling sense and then you have the thought level. You can change your thoughts, but if you haven't encountered that interconnection and you start from that embodied level, then I think it allows, I think, working both planes. But I think the embodied level, at least for me, I think is probably the most neglected in our society, and I think the one that can have the most benefits.
Well, because you think about this whole thing, I'm going to make a jump again, but you think about the whole thing about like Ray Kurzweil, you're going to upload your consciousness into the cloud, or Timothy Leary in that game that he was talking about. Well, where's your body? See, it's almost like we want to discount our bodies, because for so many of us, it's like our bodies have been shaped in such a way that they don't always feel good, and we just kind of want to move away from it, but it's still always there.
Yeah. And instead of like really finding and getting yourself and doing what required to get yourself in shape, and I'll just, say one last thing real quick. Like when I started to, do some of this, modeling of sort of social temporal cycles to be inflicted, there was a point too, I went through discomfort stage. Then I went to a point where just everything was just so real and just like really real, but like, it's like you go to, like you're in a police office, police station, or you're like in like a really uncomfortable situation and you're there and you can't disconnect from it, but everything is just there. Material, just flat on the ground right here. And suddenly you just look around you and it's just suddenly just the blandness of life, so to speak. Right. And so that's like one thing also, but then from that, you go through that, then you start to reconnect with the vibrancy of your own experience, which is why do you need to upload your consciousness anywhere? It's such an amazing experience, that so much potential and so many choices you can make and unfold your life in totally different directions at any time, if in a grounded way. But that flexibility only comes, I think, going through that. And there is this sense, because when you have all these distractions and stuff, we're creating this interest all the time. Oh, I have people calling me, I have this, I have to go here. And then there is a sort of a mundane, just, bare bones, like if you get in a wreck or something, you may, if the adrenaline's down, you may feel that. You know what I'm talking about? You're just right there. You crash land. You're like, man, this is my life. This is where I am. Look at this. Not even like look at it, but it's very real. You're not, you know what I mean? But it's real, and it just there's no way out of it. Almost, you're just there, and that's if you don't have all these bells and whistles to sort of soup it up,
and then face the reality of that moment.
You're facing that, but then, like I said, you get through that, almost annihilating. There's a sense of banality, almost banality, or maybe wrong word, not boredom, but just a concreteness, and just kind of like, and to me there's a kind of a sadness. It's sort of like, wow, this is human life. Here we are. We're just these animals walking around.
Animals. I think that's a misnomer, but I think that you really hit on something about boredom, and I think that might be one of the attractions for technology. So I think that might be something to take up, and another thing,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll just conclude by saying, I don't mean like humans or animals. I just mean that, there's that boredom, because I don't remember the last time I felt bored. I mean, I rarely, it seems like forever, but I think the boredom is that kind of discomfort that you have to go through that. And that gives you to trying to run from that, because you might find a loneliness there. You may find a solitude that you've neglected. And that's what I mean by the pain of this, you might have to connect with that, but these are these discomfort points that it's not like you're not being tortured at Guantanamo Bay. The discomfort isn't that bad, but you realize how much barriers are inside of us to prevent us from these, because I think these kind of discomfort points are actually, as you said, you can unfold. These are points of unfolding if you can go into it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And bring meaning into life, because that's what we're always seeking. One way or the other, we're always seeking to make some sort of meaning and connection.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't do that without feeling an emotion.
Yeah, that's what Soma's for. Yeah. All right, Kathy. Well, great. This is our first thing here, so we'll see how your recording came out, and hopefully this will be preserved for posterity. And
okay, I'll stop recording.